right, it is now my pleasure to introduce to you for the first time guest on Caravan to Midnight, Mr. Gil Broussard. He's a science-based researcher, amateur astronomer, and theologian who has found new evidence based on historical Chinese records of planetary bodies that provide data points he's plugged into NASA-type astronomy software that utilizes Kepler's laws of planetary motion. Now, did you get all that in one pass? Of course you did. These equations show that the data is from a real object, approximately 6.5 to 7.5 times the size of Earth. It's on an elliptical orbit, averaging a yearly cycle closer to 360 than the typical stated 3,600 years of Planet X. Gil Broussard has been able to link biblical eyewitness accounts and other historical records to the passing of this object through our solar system. Evidence suggests that in most cases the passage of this object through our solar system has less than catastrophic impacts relative to Noah's flood incident, with records, geological data supporting increased earthquake events and volcanic activity. And you know, we're experiencing a bunch of that stuff like right now. Also related methane releases, with birds, fish, and insects being notably affected. In addition, a 7-year drought is identified that begins 3.5 years before it arrives, not the drought, the planet, and ends 3.5 years after it departs. Planet 7X. Calculated projected path not only supports initial publications of its location when having been found, but projects a mathematically science-based timeline that matches, wait for it, biblical prophecy and records to such a significant degree of accuracy, it's considered solid, revealing data facts as prophesied. It is also prophesied that the truth will be known in these days, after a more than 25-year massive effort to keep silent not only the timeline of its coming, but any attempt to undermine energy tax-based profits that have been a source of economically fueling the construction of underground facilities and other preparations. The Bible tells us of an impending economic collapse, massive, fatal, possibly man-made epidemics, and much more. Are citizens to believe that the same people and institutions that have been secretly taking money to build underground hideaways, killing countless millions to maintain their secrecy and promote their agenda, have any vested interest in keeping the population alive past the point of economic collapse? Scripture suggests not. Gil Broussard, welcome to the program. Man, am I looking forward to speaking with you. I just want you to come on here and just let us have it. Just open the torpedo tube doors and put out a spread of 6 at the waterline amidship, sir. Welcome.
Well, thank you, John. I'm proud to be on your show.
Well, look, you were kind of a skeptic. You weren't going for all this stuff. And what got your attention? What got you on this path to sort this out and come to the conclusions you have arrived at?
Yes, I was pretty much a hardened skeptic on this Planet X theory. When I read a lot of the data that was out there, which really wasn't data, it was more like stories, that whenever you started looking for data, it ended up, you would hit a dead end where you would realize there was mostly circular reasoning, that just because a prior research or whatever had stated it, that has been followed through with this 3,600-year orbit. And then there was multiple claims that, like, it was a mini solar system coming in. Some say it's a giant planet larger than... It went on and on, multiple. So it was pretty much not based in science. But what kind of caught my attention was some of the ancient stories that seemed to have a thread of truth or realism, that possibly, maybe they saw something. It might not have been what was called Planet X, but that something had taken place. And so I did a quick study to start out with, and I said, if this item ever really existed, it should have been noted by the Chinese astronomers, because their documents go back almost 4,000 years. And I stumbled across a study, and that study, I can give you the name of it, was called the reevaluation of the Eastern and Western records of the supernova of 1054. And I can share the screen here to show some of you viewers of it. Let me show this.
Yeah.
All right. This is, are you able to see this?
Not yet.
Okay, it's taking a little while.
It's all right.
Well, it comes from the Dublin Institute of, Advanced Studies.
Yeah.
And what they prove is that we had an assumption earlier in the previous century that that some of the data that we were misreviewing pertaining to the supernova of 1054, that we had claimed that it was a supernova. But when we went back and more recently looked at the Chinese documents, some of this data did not correlate with a supernova because it showed, without a doubt, an object moving to multiple constellations. A supernova is stationary. Therefore, it cannot move from a different it has to be stationary in one constellation. And come to find out that the supernova actually was seen two to 3 months earlier. And that this data was actually what they call it a guest star, that the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Korean astronomers had seen in 1054 AD, that this was a sizable object. And that's what caught my attention. And I said it was so well documented that I was going to make an attempt to plot its course.
On this, you are talking about the one they refer to as NIBIRU, yeah?
Well, yes, it has probably over 30, 40 names, maybe more.
All right. Depending
on what culture and time period, because it's pretty much been here throughout the eons of time here, making its path. And what I was able to prove that is this object does not really have a stable orbit, and that if you were to pull a set time out of the hat, that the 3,600-year orbit does not apply to this. It would be closer to 360 year.
Really?
And yes, now it doesn't always pass close to Earth. It makes its orbit around the sun. Earth, it's only if Earth is in the same month or zone that is crossing, because it comes in, let's say at the end of August, circles the sun and exits around March. So if Earth happens to be in those months at the time, then we have some of these major events that's also documented in the Bible and many other cultures. And using this model that the Chinese, Korean, and Japanese astronomers, with this model that we're able to formulate, what's unique about it, that it gave us a 150 to 152 day separation between entry and exit, and both of its path is on the planetary plane of Earth, crossing Earth's path twice. This was quite startling, and actually I wanted to actually reject it or prove it wrong, because when a larger object is on Earth's planetary plane even once, that's something that's very serious. And this object is proving out to be that it crosses Earth's path twice in the same orbit. And so, what was the next step was to prove whether or not it was repeatable. This is the orbit that we were able to plot from the data, and and then we also took some of the accounts that were listed in Europe, and but they weren't as accurate as giving us a position in the sky. pretty much we only have like it was in the sky at a certain time and date but the Chinese gave us a lot more data. So whenever we overlay this, it matches the time and place that the European had seen this. And as you can see in this graph right here, you can see how the elliptical orbit is. This green circle here is Earth's orbit, and between this is March and this is the end of August. That's 150 to 152 days separation between. That happens to match some of the stories in the Bible, like in Noah's flood. When it started to rain, it only rained for about 40 days. Then the earth was flooded. And then 150 days later is when there was a great wind, which I believe was a impact blast from another meteor when it crossed the debris field at 150 days later. And that actually knocked off or ejected 71% of our crust from the opposite side. And that's why you have Pangea, where the continents are together at that time, because the crust was holding it as one unit. And then after this blast, which is the Gulf of Mexico is the largest crater on Earth. If you take a look at a map, you can see a lake that's cut in half around near Florida, and a large crater has like a double rim. You can see the second rim off of Florida if you use Google Earth. And if you had the underground topography of the Gulf, I could show you where in the center of the Gulf is a flat plain called the abyssal plain, and in the center of that plain is the Sigbee Knolls. They're I'm not quite sure how wide they are, but at least 60 or so miles across, I would say. And it's an elevated area, like little peaks.
Yeah.
The rest of it around it is a flat plain, which is typical to a crater. Now, the only reason why they want to reject such an impact is because there's two levels of heat with such a large hit. You have the initial blast, and then there's a secondary heat, which is caused by a frequency that it emits that violently carbon molecules vibrate so violently that they spontaneously combust. And you have a ring of fire that will go all the way around the Earth at the time. And that's one of the problems with such a large crater. But if you read the text of the Bible and apply this model to it in science, it actually happened during the second event, when Earth was flooded. You wouldn't have that heat problem, because heat is water is a good it's the absorber of heat.
Yeah, I get you.
And therefore, the only way that we can have an impact to create the moon, which they most certainly believe the moon came from the Earth. The Earth doesn't have, the moon doesn't have a core. It doesn't have a magnetic field, but yet the material on the moon is slightly magnetic. And there's found, even some of the samples found that there was iron ore there, rusty. Well, you can't have rust iron unless you have oxygen and water, and to better create the rust.
Yep. So
all of this is absent from the moon, but yet we have evidence that something had taken place. Well, it is required that when it was on the surface of the Earth, and because the moon was not created when the Earth was molten, that's why the moon does not have a core. So it had to be created when the Earth was solid, already in a non-molten state. And this impact explains it. You can't have a moon and still have life if it is impacted when Earth was still solid.
No.
And
Go ahead.
and so there's a logic triangle. You can't have a large impact without a flood for life to exist, and you can't have the moon to exist unless you have a large impact. So you have this logic triangle that one is pointing out to the other.
Now, can I drop in a couple of questions here? How did the moon form into a spheroid like it is? How did it become this round little planetoid thing? Well, it's a moon. It's not a planetoid. It's a moon. And approximately when did this happen, in your estimation, based on what you found?
A German scientist I don't have his name, but a German scientist had calculated that it would roughly take 300 to 400 years for the moon to coalesce into a body, a spherical shape. And as long as you have a large enough piece that has enough gravity is caused by the density of matter. And that would attract the other debris to it. And it would automatically start forming into a spherical shape. Now, if you look at those dark spots, you kind of call it the face of the moon. Those are great caverns. And they're as large as some of our states. And that's because there's missing debris to fill it in. You know, that's thousands of times larger than our Grand Canyon. But that's only there because it's missing. It didn't have enough to fill it in. And
approximately when would this have happened?
This would have been around Noah's flood, which would have been, 2,349 BC. Because the Chinese characters of their alphabet, there's one particular character that symbolizes a boat with 8, I think it's 8 people in it, and that's what one of the Chinese characters. Even the first known emperor of China became emperor because he was the first one to figure out how to drain the land. Now that's an interesting comment, that there was a problem with too much water and draining it. Like, you know, it wasn't from rain, because that meant, you know, something had to come over his borders and fill in these voids, and he was able to figure out how to drain it. And he became emperor.
You know, Mussolini got the trains to run on time, and look what happened with him. It's always something that you don't expect, you know what I mean? So
we have, what this proves out, and this is not the only scientific report that I found, okay? It's there's a scientific report that was developed by UL, a college that's local here. The astrophysicists, there was 2 of them. One was Matisse, another one was Whitmire. They did a study that showed 30 or 40 different comets, I believe, in their study, that the orbits of these comets were warped by unknown gravity that was on the edge of our solar system. And then that was confirmed by a secondary study, which was independent, by the UK. It pointed to the same area of space, Sagittarius. The Chinese, the data right now, if it's going to come back again around, it's going to come out of the constellation Sagittarius, and it's going to come from the ecliptic, which is on the planetary plane of Earth. And now, if we also take into account when one of the things that I came across accidentally was when I did the model, and I picked a certain date, and I reversed the model in time to 1992, where the Voyager and Pioneer probes were. That this is the same area of space that NASA placed the Voyager and Pioneer probes. Now, what are the odds of that? You can see in the center right here that green line that arcs across the center is the ecliptic. You have the Pioneer 11 here. At the bottom, you have the Pioneer 2, and they have another Voyager 1 at the top up here. They are triangulating to figure out the position. In 1992, that was about 8 years outside of our solar system. Now, what's interesting, the way this turned out, it's exact. If you look at the Pioneer and the Voyager probe, you see how I drew a circle using where planet. They're exactly the same distance apart from the planet with the same angle. What are the odds of that? We have a real object that's entering our system, and that's why we're having all of these effects of earthquake. Now, from right here, this is 8 years out of our solar system. That meant it entered our solar system around year 2000. That would have been around on Neptune's orbit. And according to the software, using Kepler's laws of planetary motion, and we're going with an object same density as Earth, but much larger, between 6.5 to 7.5 times the diameter of Earth.
Yeah.
And we allow in Kepler's laws of planetary motion, according to the model, and says from the edge of our universe it takes 16 years to reach us. Well, that's about 2016. So if you look at the escalation of earthquakes and volcanoes, the magnetic field of the Earth changing, the sun's activity, the heating up of planets, and it goes on and on, the birds and fish kills.
Yeah.
The weird weather patterns. This is exactly what we would expect of an inbound planet. And we would see it more intense as it's getting closer. That's exactly what we're seeing. The Bible actually says that it's similar to the pains of a woman giving birth. It will escalate in that manner.
Well, I think we've all figured out by now that the government's not going to say, okay, people, we're going to give you the heads up on something bad that's about to happen. They're not going to say a thing. They're not going to say anything.
Exactly.
They've never said anything.
Doesn't that kind of match the profile that the Bible says? Prior to an arrival, you'd see the earthquakes rise like the pains of a woman giving birth, and that's exact. And that this they had stopped updating the information in 2007, and we are getting more earthquakes in one day than the previous century for a whole year. Remember the story about Joseph?
Yes, sir.
Well, let's take a minute to take a look at that there. Joseph of Egypt. There was 7 years of drought, but prior to that, he had a dream. Remember, at age 16, he had a dream where 11 stars and the moon and the stars bowed to him.
Yep.
And then later on, when he was 40 years old, he was in Egypt, and he was the second highest person. He was right under the Pharaoh, and he was the one in charge of storing up grain for this devastating drought that they were told of that was going to devastate the land. Well, here's a disc in Germany called the NIBIRU disc. And when I first came across this, I was interested because it shows a star pattern, the sun and the moon. Well, you can't see the stars if the sun's out.
Right.
Two, it's not an eclipse because it shows the moon to the right.
Yes.
So it caught my attention, and I disagreed with the present misinterpretation. They don't even mention that the moon is not involved with this eclipse. They think it's a normal one. They even misidentified this constellation. I noticed was the moon is facing the wrong direction. The illuminated side has to face the sun. So if you reverse that, it gives you a different time in a month that you have to be looking for an event, which is one of the main things the experts missed. Okay, they were looking for I think it was like a 3-day moon when it should have been like a 28-day moon, something like that. And so I'm looking for a third object that would eclipse the sun because the moon is not involved. You cannot have a crescent moon involved with a solar eclipse. It's only a new moon that's able to do it. Crescent moon cannot do it. So when I identified these outer constellations, which is Gemini and Capricorn, and Pleiades in the middle from Germany, I was able to say that this was the month of March and April. Then, when I noticed that you cannot see this constellation, Orion, from Germany at that latitude, the only way that you can see this is if you had a latitude of Luxor, Egypt. You see this red line here is the latitude of Germany. If you go to this blue line, that's Luxor, Egypt. And that's a tilt of 26 to 28 degrees, which has happened multiple times in the Bible. And when we look for this certain pattern with you see how the moon has a crescent here? This is the pattern of the planets. And we put a third object, eclipsing the sun, which gives you about a 3-hour eclipse. The software gives us April 6th of 1810 BC. They don't compensate in the software where the calendar year changed from 360 to 365 and a quarter days. That happened around 700 BC during Hezekiah's time. This happened globally because it's documented by almost every civilization on Earth that had a calendar. Their calendar prior to 700 BC was 360-day year. So whenever you subtract the difference of 16 years, you end up with April 6, 1794, when this happened. And this was the same time period as Joseph of Egypt, documented by the German astronomers. That proves to us that Joseph dreamed, remember?
Yes.
Where he had a dream that the stars bowed to him. That was Leo. 11 stars was Leo. And the moon. Now, keep in mind, it says the moon and the sun. Well, you can't see the stars if the sun's out, so that word sun actually is illuminated body. It was this planet that he actually saw. Because he said illuminated body, the moon, and the stars. Because once he said stars, you can't see stars if the sun is out. And so it actually, when the earth tilted 26 to 28, the heavens bowed to him, just as the text says. That's a real event. And the 7-year drought was correct. You had 3.5-year drought coming in, and 3.5-year drought as it left. So midway through the drought is this date right here given by the NIBIRU disk. We can date the actual event. This object, this is the ancient observatory, which is about 20 miles where this was found. This is Gothic Germany. This is the viewpoint of it. You see this old riverbed right here,
yep,
where they had changed the river to better put a dam here, and that's shown on the disc. You see this bottom curvature right here. This
yes,
that's the riverbank. You see in front of the observer.
Excellent.
So all of this is proving out, and here's an example also on what we're looking at. This is the latitude of Gothic Germany when it moved 26 to 28 degrees, and then if Joseph was in Egypt, he would have moved closer to the equator at the time. And of course, the Earth corrects itself after that, because it's like when two planets are passing close to each other like this, it's like two magnets, two bar magnets. The opposite poles are attracting to each other, and it causes us to tilt. And this happened, before. Now, after this event happened, we had the Exodus. Now, that's what's interesting about this. This is where we can prove that it doesn't have it doesn't necessarily have a stable orbit, because we have items that it's able to collide with, like moons and planets and such. We have Pluto on outer edges that's at a very strange extreme tilt. And it used to be a moon to Neptune, is a common knowledge to that. So what hit it or bumped it to give it this extreme elliptical orbit at a steep angle? This particular planet is able to explain many of the anomalies we see in our universe. Well, just prior to the Exodus, it collided with what we call today Ceres, Ceres is the remnant of a destroyed planet, which is a part of the asteroid belt. And that is the debris field from this destroyed planet. And how do we know that? Well, you can use Fibonacci numbers and using a series of 3, it shows you the exact spacing of each planet. And right where the debris field is, there's supposed to be a planet, according to the calculations. Well, when it came in, it collided with Ceres, slowing the forward speed of Planet X to about 1/20th of its normal speed. And as it went around the sun, when it came around, that's when the exodus happened. That was the 3 days of darkness. This is similar to the 3 hours of darkness during Yeshua's sacrifice. But that was going at normal speed. That was only 3 hours of darkness, just like the NIBIRU disk. It was 3 hours of darkness. But right here was 3 days of darkness, because it's only traveling at 1/20th. It's a normal speed. And it took 4 more passes around the sun before it gained to a somewhat normal orbit of 358. And so what's after the Exodus is Joshua's long day. This we can prove out scientifically with this model again.
Gil, do you have any idea how disturbing this is? I mean, you're all mellow and everything. I'm pretty mellow too, but I'm looking at this stuff going, oh man.
Well, I've had a few years to kind of misaccept it, because I was in I was trying to prove it wrong. Even though I had data, I was trying to prove it wrong, because I didn't like the results.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've come to accept it because it's overwhelming. You see this green line, which is across the screen right here.
Yes, sir.
This is the orbit of Earth. Earth is traveling to the left. You see this red line, that is the orbit of planet 7X, and it's traveling here. So you have both bodies moving at simultaneously. Okay, Earth is entering deeper and deeper into the tail of this comet/planet, if you want to call it, and Earth is losing its energy from the sun at 4.5 to 5.5% compounded hourly. So within 24 to 28 hours, Earth's rotation comes to a stop. It's only slowing down 4.5 to 5% per hour, compounded. And this is how, and this model works. I had because there's 2 theories right now. There's astronomy theory that says the tail of a comet is ice particles. The other camp is the physicists. Physicists say that the ruling force in the universe is electromagnetic, and that the tail of a comet is plasma. Well, if Earth goes through the tail of this object, which is like a comet-like tail, if it's let's say ice particles, we got nothing to worry about. Ice particles won't affect us.
Right.
But if it's plasma, it will.
That's a problem.
It will do exactly like the story of Joshua said. It will slow us down. We'll have a 12-hour extended day. Earth will come to a stop. And this is going to be happening again, actually, because it's pretty much mentioned in Revelation, if you understand the data that it's giving us. I took this model and showed it to a physics professor. And these are his words. He says, I'm the first one to logically explain this event, and on how it is possible without having mile-high tidal waves, because Earth is slowing down in its rotation, just like you would turn a rheostat or a light dimming switch. It lessens and lessens. And then if you read the story, again, the day was extended by 12 hours, and that there was more of the enemy killed by fiery hail than he killed with a sword. Fiery hail is meteors.
Yep.
And exactly an hour later is where we enter in enter into the debris field. Takes us about an hour to exit out of it because of the angle that is crossing Earth's path is exactly an hour, which also matches parts of Revelation where it says your doom comes, within 1 hour. This proves the eyewitness accounts that are in the Bible as well as the Chinese records. If you can take a misobserved phenomena, bring it into the laboratory, show that it's repeatable, that is science. Whether it comes from clay tablets or papyrus or the Bible, you cannot mimic Kepler's laws of planetary motion or the sequence of events according to the model. The biblical accounts are following a scientific model to the T, mathematically as well. So we have a real object, and that's what the data continues to show us. That's somewhat scary here. After that was Job's trouble. You can read how his flock and his shepherds were destroyed by fiery hail. In the next paragraph, there's a great wind that knocked down a house that his sons and daughters were in, and it killed them, which is the pressure wave from an impact. And this is how Job lost almost everything he had. At the same time of Job was the account of Ruth and Naomi. If you read the story, it was about between 7 to 10 year drought here, to where she had to go back into the land. And this was during the time of either Sabbath year or Jubilee, because she asked for her land back. So we can time this even, according to the biblical scale of 50 years. Now this is King Saul and David. This is how we get the Star of David. This was the planet that was passing. You had 3.5 years of drought at the end of Saul's reign. You had 3.5 year drought at the beginning of King David's reign. Again, 7-year drought. After that, you get Jonah's warning to Nineveh. This was the same time frame around as Hezekiah, but this was 40 days earlier. You know, what's interesting with this story is what's not being said. Jonah did not perform one miracle. So try that today. Go to a town, say, repent, and see what sort of results you get. How did he get the results? I think the people saw and felt the earthquakes, the volcanoes, the fish kills, the bird kills, the seasonal change, the droughts. They knew something was wrong because they were well in tune with their surroundings of nature and everything. Only thing Jonah had to do was go and point in the sky, because exactly at 40 days, this is what the software shows us. At 40 days, it's just rounded the sun. Earth is here. Planet X is just coming out from around the sun. You get a direct line up with it, and that's what they were able to see. It was the first sighting of Planet X for them. 40-day warning without a telescope. That's what worried them, and that's when they went into repentance. The whole town repented. It's included the king, because they knew something was wrong.
You bet. This is amazing, Gil. I'm serious. This is fascinating.
So after that, remember Hezekiah? We have an area in the English Bible. It says like a sundial going east to west. A sundial would not work, because that meant for the shadow to reverse east to west, that meant the earth had to come to a screeching halt in its rotation, back up 10 degrees or whatever on a sundial, stop again, travel 4 to 5 times faster forward to regain the time that is lost, because there's no mention of any delay in time right here. So a sundial does not work. So when I went and looked at the Hebrew text says it's 10 steps, like steps on a stair. Well, that makes a little sense. If we take a step and face it south, not east to west, we again have a 26 to 28 degree tilt of Earth, like the NIBIRU disk. The shadow would have reversed 10 steps and then went back forward without any time difference. There would be no delay or forwarding of time. the Earth tilted again. I mean, it passed close. It didn't pass behind Earth. It passed probably in front of it. Now, during this time period, 687 BC, that this had happened. Because if it had been east to west, like in the sundial, the oceans would have covered the continents. Then, later that evening, we had a meteor shower that killed 185,000 soldiers that was ready to invade Jerusalem. If you read the text carefully, it's fiery hail that killed them. The angel, which is messenger, can also be applied to this planet when it's passing by. That is God's messenger that killed the enemy, which is the fiery hail. These last three incidents, Jonah, Hezekiah, and this 185, happened in the same year. We have Haggai. At this time, they had neglected to build Jehovah's temple. They only had a tent, I believe. They went ahead and built their fine homes and the wall around Jerusalem, and they just had the tent, but they never built the temple. The Almighty God mad at him and said, "You will work through the Sabbath," which is a Sabbath year here. He said, "You will not get rest because you didn't build my temple, and I'm going to send an earthquake so bad that it'll throw a driver out of his chariot." He said that he would shake the world. During this exact same time, this is when Alexander the Great is taking Tyre. After he built that land bridge to Tyre, he was trying to breach the wall. He had problems. It says meteors came out of the sky, or fiery hail, broke up into 4 or 5, and collided into the wall of Tyre, knocking it down. So Alexander could go in. The meteors came from our planet passing by. I can also time the Jubilees with this and the Sabbath year, because the next year on Alexander, he had took a town in Persia, and there was an eclipse. Well, when I go to that latitude and longitude in the software, it gives me the year before the event happened, and it lines up with the Sabbath year of the Hebrews. Now, after 7 Sabbaths, that's 49 years, the 50th year is a Jubilee. So after this Sabbath year right now, this next year will be a Jubilee year. The Hebrews expect the Messiah to return on a Jubilee. And since he said when Israel was formed that generation, which is basically he's talking about the Holocaust generation, shall not die out till all is fulfilled, that means it can't be the next Jubilee, which is 50 years later. That meant that generation would be close to 132 years old. So he would probably return this coming Jubilee. And Elijah shows up on the Feast of Passover, announcing the Messiah coming, and he'll come 3.5 days, which is mid of week and mid of night, which happens to be the same date given in Revelation 12:1. Astronomically, it's giving us a date. And that's exactly 3.5 days separation between the Feast of Passover and the meteor shower happening on the opposite side of Earth at the time. He tells time in units of sevens all the way up to 50. And then, like right now, because of, remember the NIBIRU disk we talked about, well, we can calculate to Joseph's father, Jacob, who was a nation, he was renamed Israel. He said that nation will 400 years of captivity, 40 years in the wilderness. Well, now we can calculate the exact time they entered the land. At Mount Sinai, he says, when you enter the land, that'll be your first Jubilee. Well, from the time they entered the land to now is exactly 70 Jubilees, which is significant in the Hebrew way of counting. The Holocaust generation to 2016, there'll be 70 years. We have some parallel things here that are happening, that the math, biblically as well as astronomy and science is merging. Haggai, it happened on either a Sabbath year where he told the Hebrews, because you didn't build my temple, you will not rest that year, you will build through it. And that lined up with Alexander the Great. taking Tyre. And 362 years later, you come to Yeshua's sacrifice. And if you read it using astronomical eyes, we have a problem. We have a 3-hour eclipse on the day, on the preparation day of Passover. Well, that's a full moon. Well, you can't have a solar eclipse with a full moon. It takes a new moon. The moon is 180 degrees opposite on where it needs to be. So the moon is not involved with that eclipse for the 3 hours. A solar eclipse can only happen, I think, 7.3 minutes.
And
maybe
so
no more than 10.
So if it's not involved, what is?
That means there's a third object. It is describing a third object, yes.
Yep.
And an object 6.5 to 7 times the diameter of Earth crossing in the model gives us exactly 3 hours.
Wow.
Without the Chinese documents, we could not have. That was the key to unlocking it.
Mm-hmm.
And without that, as well as the NIBIRU disk, it was just found within this century, I believe. Maybe around year 2000, but its interpretation came within this century. But this is how it came around, and the model shows us whenever it got in between the sun and the earth right here, Passover gave a 3-hour eclipse, because during Passover the moon is on the opposite side of Earth, and this was the same point where Yeshua was crucified. The hill on where he was crucified at or sacrificed at was the same area where Abraham took Isaac to sacrifice him. This was a mekrah. Remember, I was telling you that the word mekrah in Hebrew means rehearsal pattern. It doesn't mean feast. It means rehearsal. Abraham was rehearsing the death of a son. Abraham was the father of a nation. This was a rehearsal pattern. The mountain that Abraham did it on, Mount Moriah, I believe it is, was cut in half. They were quarrying the rock, so they cut it in half and made stones to be able to make the wall of Jerusalem. And that exposed was called the skull, which is now called the Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. And Yeshua was sacrificed right there, right where the original place was, where Abraham was. And there's a good chance the ark is buried underneath there in a secret cave, because the ark was not there during the second temple. It was only there for the first temple. It was hidden in between there. So to fulfill the mekrah of the lamb's blood being sprinkled onto the ark, remember how the ground ripped open when the centurion pierced him? The blood went through the crack and landed on the ark, fulfilling the mekrah and eliminating the sin or paying for the sin that took place at Mount Sinai, because they gave a blood covenant that they would have no other God but him, and then they built that golden calf. They owed their life to the Father, and Yeshua decided to pay for it with his own life. Let's see, after that, we're going to go into secular history. And what we have here is, the next one is Constantine. Remember that object that Constantine saw? It was claimed to be a cross in the sky.
Yes.
Constantine's symbol was a cross, an X with a P in the center. The cross wasn't created yet. Constantine was a sun worshiper. You can look at the coins here that were printed after he had seen this. This is the deity of the sun, and this is the object that he saw coming around the sun. And then right after that is the Mayans. The Mayans were a serious drought, killed about 90% of their population. because their crops couldn't grow and there was lack of water. If we take, they had multiple counts. They had a long count, a short count. They had other counts that they're not exactly advertising because they don't know what to do with them. But if you take the last count, which is called a Baktun, and add that to the year of Constantine, which was 312, you get 707. It was documented that the drought at the beginning of year 700, somewhere around that time frame, was the drought. That's what a Baktun was. They were measuring the time frame between each event. The Mayan calendar is probably an event calendar saying when this object is coming around. That's why they can't understand the different units of measure. I don't have time to investigate that yet, but I'm willing to, I think I'm pretty close. If you look at the top right here where it's blown up, you see where I've enlarged the way they carved that calendar in stone. And if you look at that emblem they have, doesn't that look like a comet? The way they have that circular blue object with the tail looks just like a comet. And they have this on the outer rim of this. That's roughly about how many times that it's passed. So I think the Mayans were tracking. They were marking each time that this object came around during the civilization. And after the Mayans, we have the Chinese incident in 1054, where they documented that the Chinese, the Koreans, and the Japanese, all three of these documented this object. If you look in most of Asian culture, see how they have a dragon? I had personally taken this picture when I was in Beijing, where they have these large bronze bells. You can see where this shape of the dragon in the center, they got a circular object with lightning coming off of it, it seems like. That's our object. They were very fascinated with the stars as well, and they show this. Then we talked about their plotting of it. Then after that, we come to 1378, where there was this, during the Dark Ages, during the plagues of the Black Plague and everything, it passed at the beginning and at the end, Dark Ages. Right here, there's a painting. They say that this is Halley's Comet. Well, we have a problem with that because Halley's Comet does not cause a meteor shower. You can see in the painting fire raining from heaven.
Oh, yeah.
You see the trees are snapped because of the earthquake and shifting.
Yes.
People are holding their stomach because of drought, lack of food. You have buildings broken up. You have the uplift of land. You have cracks in the ground they're showing. This is not common to Halley's Comet, but it is common to this object. And then after that, in 1694, we have a wooden carving from Germany where they see two significant objects in the sky. And it's left up to the viewer to determine what this is. It would have passed sometime around that time. In other words, it had to pass on the other side of the moon. Yeah. It was considerably further.
Wow.
But during the time of Joshua's long day, there's documents in the Middle East that said Joshua and them saw an object 50 times larger than the moon. That's a visual perspective from Earth. Well, if you take an object 6.5 to 7.5 times the diameter of Earth, put it to the center in between the moon and the Earth passing, that's exactly what you get in visual perspective. And that's really the only way you can get a tilted Earth as well. And for us to go through the plasma tail, it has to pass close. That's what the model shows. It lines up to all of their visual commentary. And that's what science is. You can bring this observed phenomenon, make a model of it, prove it that it's repeatable. That's science. Anybody that said there's no science in the Bible, I'm afraid they're wrong now. There's a considerable amount.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
So if we go to Revelation real quick, when it crosses, Revelation is describing it coming very close to us, to Earth in March. Probably missing us by an hour, somewhere around that. And Earth will go through its tail, just like it did during Joshua's long day. Therefore, the astronomy community will miss on its prediction on what half of the Earth will be hit by a meteor shower, because they're not compensate for the Earth slowing down by 12 hours, because that's a model that the physics community is proving out, that the tail of a comet is plasma, not ice particles. So the astronomy community will predict the Middle East on that side of the Earth being hit by a meteor shower. They will predict this half of the globe being hit, but with a 12-hour delay. The Bible clearly says 1/3 of the grass, 1/3 of the trees, and later it says 1/3 of the rivers. They just described continental crust. They didn't have a word for continental, but they just described it. So what half of the globe has 1/3 of the continental crust? North and South America. Keep in mind that North and South America was not discovered yet, but they're describing it. And so I'm afraid there's going to be an error in calculations, and we'll have to go opposite in what the astronomy community is saying.
And now, when are we due to pass through this thing's tail?
You see, in Revelation 12:1, it gives us a date using astronomy. It says the moon at the foot of Virgo, basically, it says the woman. If you're going to use moon, that means you're looking up in the stars anyway.
Okay.
So it says the moon at the foot of the woman with a crown of 12 stars. Well, Leo is 11 stars. The 12th star is a planet Jupiter, which is the king planet. And that gives us a date of March 26, 2016. Now, what makes that date very incredible is man did not have the ability to give us that date that far in advance. They didn't have the knowledge. You see, like the constellations shifts over every 2,100 years. In other words, Passover during Yeshua's time, it was Libra in the skies of Jerusalem. Only today is it Virgo at midnight. Okay? Then for Jupiter to be there, Jupiter has an orbit of 11.86 years. Then the moon has an orbit of 29.53 days. But the tilt of the moon, because it's at a it's a tilted orbit, that tilt is 18.59 years. For that tilt to put the moon right under the foot of Virgo, as it shows, this is what the astronomy software is showing us. The moon at the foot of Virgo, the crown of 12 stars with Jupiter there. The word in Revelation 12:1 says sun, but sun cannot be a correct translation, which is most common in the Bible. That actually word means illuminated body. Okay? Because if the sun is out, you can't see the stars. But the model shows the tail of this comet-like planet. Remember, the tail points opposite of the sun. The model shows that the tail is only illuminating Virgo. Specifically, like the text is quoting. It says only Virgo is illuminated, not Leo or any of the other kind, only Virgo. And this is what the model shows us. And this was given to us over 2,000 years ago. To be able to get this accurate, you need 4 decimal places behind the prime number to be able to get this correct. And they didn't have decimal places or zeros supposedly yet. So how could they make the calculation to get it this correct for us today?
Seriously?
It's not by man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's literally impossible to throw a random number out there and get this to be exactly 3.5 days after the Feast of Passover.
Right. Wow.
Remember how the 2 prophets prophesied 1,260 days? Then they're dead for 3.5?
Yes.
Well, the root word for prophecy is to profess, to speak. Well, they can't speak if they're dead for 3.5. It says that they prophesied for 1,260. So you got to add 3.5 days to that. And then the ones who were placed in hiding, only in hiding 1,260 days before the resurrection and rapture happens for both of them. Well, that automatically pushes you that, or tells you that the 2 prophets are on the scene in Jerusalem 3.5 days earlier than the group that goes into hiding. And this is exactly what we have right here. March 26, 2016, three and a half days earlier, is a full moon, which is the Feast of Passover. When Elijah comes to announce the groom is coming. This lines up to a T, and that was impossible for them to guess that date and make it fit the story, the way it's told in the Hebrew. Because Mr. Elijah has to announce the Messiah's coming before he can ever show up.
I'll tell you, this is a stunning presentation.
You see here, this is the model we have here. You can see how the tail illuminates only Virgo. You can see Jupiter and Leo. This is the software model. This is the timeline I was telling you about. The two prophets are ahead of the group that goes into hiding, exactly 3.5 days. They're there at the Feast of Passover, the night of the Feast of Passover. Now, I may make it something clear. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell the future. I can only interpret a date given into astronomy, using astronomy figures of Revelation 12:1. And I can tell you mathematically it's impossible for people 2,000 years ago that wrote that to make this fit. When we do see it, it'll probably look more like a comet.
Well,
not as a planet, because we should have seen it with optics telescopes since year 2000, because that's when it entered our solar system. It was out there equal to Neptune. As soon as we do see it, I'll be more than glad to say, yes, this is it. Just to point out a couple of them that I missed earlier. The first one's right after Noah's flood was an incident with Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember, brimstone was the account of the Bible. If you read the details a little bit, he tells them not to turn around and to clear the area before they can do any of the destructions. Lot's wife didn't listen. There was 2 towns that got destroyed. After the first blast, she came back around because she missed her town there, and then she got exposed to the second blast. Well, if you look to the bottom left, right here, these are pictures in, Japan during the... If you look at these Nagasaki, Hiroshima, these are people and items that were vaporized where it leaves their shadow left on the stone. Because everything around them, all the dust in the rock or in the stone was vaporized out of the rock, therefore it's bleached. And wherever the person was standing is still grayish. So it leaves a perfect outline of the human beings. You can see on the steps here where a human being was sitting when he got vaporized. And then the wind would blow their ashes away. So the only thing left is a shadow. Same thing happened to Lot's wife. When she came around the corner, she got exposed. The second blast exploded, vaporizing her. Her ashes are blown away. Then they come look for her later, and they see this perfect outline of her. They said, the Almighty turned into a pillar of salt. It's man's description, not God's description of what he did. It's man's description. And that's what they saw. During the same time as Lot, you had the destruction of the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel it's mentioned in the Talmud that the top was burned and the bottom sank because of liquefaction. Here's the ancient city of Babylon. If you look, now this is the mid-kingdom era. If you look for the older kingdom, you look for the south. And what do you see here? You see an area that's shaped in a square with a moat around it. The only reason why there's a moat is because the base sank into the ground. And this is where the actual ziggurat or this Tower of Babel was actually at. It was right here. There's evidence of it right there. And that's what is said in the evidence right here. It actually matches what we can observe. Therefore, it gives it validity. And then with the science information with the planet, we have a reason on what took place. Because remember, the ziggurat is made out of stone. So how can the top burn if it's made out of stone?
Exactly.
And brick.
Yeah.
But a meteor shower that'd be a pretty good description of it. if we follow the timeline, you can see where it keeps somewhat of a decent pattern between, unless it's bumping into a planet or a moon, then that will needs to disturb its orbit. If we look at the biggest case is when Ceres was destroyed at Exodus, you can see how it came back 52 years later for Joshua's long day, then 131 days for Job and Ruth, then 290 days to King David and Saul, and finally meets a normal orbit now, a 358, which is Hezekiah. And remember how the year changed now from 360 to 365. The reason why, because we had room to move, because the planets are locked in a magnetic trough, if you want to call it. Well, Ceres is destroyed, so that allowed expansion of our, if you wish to call it, the trough. So the next time it passed close to Earth, it dragged us outward a little bit, giving us a greater distance to go around the sun. That's why it changed from 360 to 365 and a quarter globally in every culture, not just biblical. Yes, the main efforts for governments right now is to preserve the markets, financial markets, because the government needs the dollars to function. So without the financial markets functioning, they're not able to do anything to help out the people or to help out themselves as far as building underground facilities or anything of any planning, that is. So that's what they're doing right now. They're shielding information from the public. They stopped this type of information in 1992. You can see where NASA was actively publishing articles prior to 1992. And then the Vatican Infrared Observatory went online in 1993. That's also when Dr. Harrington mysteriously died of throat cancer right after he built or did his observations in New Zealand looking for Planet X. Then if you look at how many astronomers have ended up kicking the bucket kind of early in their life, it seems like. I think the number right now, don't quote me, but I think it's somewhere between 70 to 80 astronomers that had a interest, a untimely death, if you want to call it that. So, in other words, if we correlate all of the data, these are scientific reports, as well as our models, and as well as confirm, if we can take these eyewitness accounts and prove that there's a model that fits what they show, and it does, whether it's the NIBIRU disk or the Chinese data or the biblical data, all of this data is pointing to there's 88 constellations. And out of the 88, it's pointing to one constellation, which is Sagittarius. And not just anywhere in Sagittarius, but on the ecliptic. Because there's 3 fixed points now. You have 2 points on Earth's orbit, and the third point is the sun. Well, with 3 fixed points with only a gap of 150 days, does not give you leeway for it to be pointing at polar south or any other direction. It points it directly on the ecliptic or planetary plane of Earth, which puts that on the ecliptic right there in Sagittarius. And the model shows us it would take 16 years from the orbit of Neptune for it to reach us. Well, that 16 years is about up. That's this following year. And if we look at how everything has escalated in frequency and intensity, what's the proper answer to that? It's definitely not global warming, because the math doesn't work out on global warming. This is because all of the other planets are warming up as well. So there's only one common denominator that this seems to fit all of the scenarios, and that's we have an inbound planet that's causing these changes to occur. And it's only going to get worse in the very near future.
And what about preparation for this? You mentioned a while ago that you think that we could have an encounter with this thing as somewhere around maybe September of this year. Did I get that right? Because that's what I thought I heard.
No, I'm kind of expecting SEAL either 3 and 4 to happen.
Around September.
Well, if we read, if we read, let's see, Ezekiel, one of the chapters in there, I can't quite remember which one it is, talks about a war, and there's also mention of a festival, and that festival is the one that they hold in September, which happens to be the one coming up in September. I think that's the war that Ezekiel was talking about that matches SEAL 4. Because it also talks about famine and other things that match that same seal. So it's at the end of September, keep in mind. It's not at the beginning, it's at the end.
Mm-hmm. I can't help wondering if maybe that's what this Jade Helm thing is about, to get troops out there and deployed.
Well, let me see, before that, we should have an economic collapse. So we need the troops out there, yes, if we have economic collapse, because remember what they did in Cyprus and a few other places, what they call that, bail-in, where they locked down the accounts, you can only put out your monthly expenses?
That's right, yeah. Bail-in.
I had talked to a businessman right now that he has a business and he was going to pay off some debts over $100,000. And he had problems doing it because he was not allowed to withdraw anything over $5,000, and it was his money. Yeah, he had to jump through hoops. So the average person would have a very hard time trying to pull out anything over $5,000 at the moment.
Looks like 700 million euros has already been taken out of Greek banks already. And as I posed this question to a couple of economists over the last few days, and that is, you think Russia might come to their aid? And sure enough, the Greeks are asking Russia if they will come to their aid. So yeah, it's coming, definitely. It's rolling right now.
The BRICS Association, which is 6 countries at the moment: China, Russia, Venezuela, South Africa, India, and Iraq, will have their own banking system towards either end of September or October. They will have they already had 192 banks that have approved the Basel III agreement, which tells them what natural resources that will be allowed to back up their currency. Then the banks will come online sometime around end of September or October. If that happens, we'll probably see CO3 before that happens, economic collapse, because the financial people will see the writing on the wall. And so government will go in there and stop you from pulling out of markets. They're going to freeze things. So
the money will still work. You just can't get your hands on it.
Right. You're going to watch your value, your money continue to fall. Mm-hmm. And you can't do anything about it, because they put a freeze in effect. You can only pull out your monthly expenses.
And I suppose you have to present your self-assessment sheet to them before they can determine what amount that will be for your monthly expenses. Yeah, that sounds cool.
Oh yeah, it's we have a trap being sprung on us that's incredible. But there's according to Revelation 12:1, that date for the meteor shower. And remember, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just saying this as a lineup. All past events happen in March and April, depending on the way you look at it. The modern day would be March, and that was March 26th, according to Revelation 12:1, and that matches with the Hebrew feast. So. There's a Hebrew requirement on that particular. There's 3 feasts you are required to be in Jerusalem to better celebrate that. So, and the Feast of Passover is one of them. So for you to see the 2 prophets and to meet Yeshua, you need to be in Jerusalem. And makes perfect sense because that's the safest place to be at the point, because that's the pivot point when Earth starts to tilt. It'll be the least affected area. If you're in other areas of the world, you're going to catch hell.
Okay, that's it. I'm putting on my calendar. We're going to Jerusalem. Yeah, I'm laughing, but I'm not really. I'm not laughing because I'm not serious. We'll broadcast from Jerusalem.
Whenever, remember, it said the Bible tells us we have to see a sign in heaven.
Yeah.
And now we know what that sign is. It's the sign of Jonah, with the 40-day warning. That was the sign he was talking about. We'll see it before that if you're attentive. You'll see a comet, and they'll probably announce it as a comet. But it's actually a comet planet. And you see some. So what we're fixing to see right now, remember, we're in a Sabbath year right now. Anyone who follows the Hebrew rehearsal pattern, that means you're storing up 1 year of food, either in the 6th year or in the. The poor are furnishing their food right now. You're supposed to have 1 year of food, and that's going to prepare you for seal 3 and 4. How can you buy food if you're under economic collapse and you can't withdraw large sums of money to get prepared? So, and then you don't wait until the seal 4, which is war, pandemic, disease, famine. You have to prepare before that. And so what is our timing? It is the Hebrew feast and the rehearsal patterns. He says in a Sabbath year to store up 1 year of food, and that's why. Then if you look at Jacob's trouble, well, you go read the story on his marriage. He worked 7 years and he was tricked, and he got a false bride, a bride that he didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
Then he had to work another 7 years for his true bride. Well, we're the bride, so let's reverse that for the groom. Okay?
Yeah.
If you start from September 11, when the war started against Jacob, right there, that was September 11. That happened to be a Sabbath year. Sabbath year, that meant contracts in and started at the end of that year. So you start counting the following year after that, 7 years. Then we have to go another 7 years, okay, which we're now in the Sabbath again, and contracts will end at the end of this Sabbath. Then we enter a Jubilee. Well, it's known by the Messianic community that the Messiah will return on a Jubilee. The true groom will be returning. And the Bible tells us this generation shall not pass away before all is fulfilled. And that was referring to the generation that saw Israel born, the Holocaust generation. We can't go to the next Jubilee. They'll be 132 years old. It's this Jubilee coming up. People say it's not scientific. I'm sorry, they're wrong. Biblically, it is scientific. You have to look at it in the right perspective. Only within the last 15 years or less has the physicists gained ground in their own theory that the universe is electromagnetic ruled, not gravity ruled, and that the tail of a comet is plasma. Remember that comet that passed near Mars? The physicists predicted, because of the proximity it was passing near Mars, that there'd be an electrical discharge between the two. The astronomers said, no, the tail is ice particles. You can't have electrical discharge. They observed it. Guess what? We had electrical discharges.
I remember.
The tail of a comet is plasma. Right now, we have this battle, and astronomy is, you got the majority going to the astronomy side. They're going to be wrong on this upcoming event. They're going to predict the wrong half of this earth because they're using the wrong model. There's a biblical model that proves out the physics, and it works. People need to get in line with proper science and proper biblical models, because all these stories in the Bible are not accident. They're data points telling you the end, giving you the data you need to understand the last book of the Bible, to save your life, physical life, not your soul, not your spiritual life, your physical life. It says only a remnant will save their physical life. Many will save their spirit, but only that path that saves their physical life is very narrow. Broad is the road to destruction, where your physical body gets destroyed. But you got to start reading Hebrew and understanding the Hebrew customs. And my Messiah is Yeshua. That's his Hebrew name. Because there's no J or J sound or J letter in the Hebrew alphabet.
Right.
So how can his name be Jesus?
It was Joshua. Now I'm hearing Yeshua a lot, but I heard Joshua.
Yeah, his full name is Yehoshua. His shorter name is Yeshua, which is the shorter version. Both are absolutely correct, but that's the more Aramaic version, which is fine. Aramaic is 70% alike to Hebrew. There's very little difference between the two, and I suggest people do the walk. Don't believe me? Go find it out. Go find out for yourself. The Bible says in the end times, the truth of the Torah will be very rare. That you can go to a Christian bookstore. There's 2,600 different Bibles, I believe it is.
Only 2,600.
I have a copyright. That means they have to change something, right?
Oh, yeah.
That means it definitely didn't become the original. Not a single one of them have the 6,000 olives and taves in it. Olives and taves is two characters that Yeshua said, I am this mystery. I am the olive and tav. There is no English word to represent olive and tav. There's only the Hebrew characters. You better be a person that seeks knowledge. If you're one that just sits there and gets spoon-fed by someone that's corrupting it, then you deserve exactly what you're going to get. You have to do your own research. I'll point you to it, but it still leaves you have to do it. You cannot rely on someone else, because your salvation is yours. I have nothing to gain in this. I'm not seeking a profit or a dollar to this. Matter of fact, I have more to lose than to gain, because I was a skeptic to a certain point about this, and my eyes were open, because when you start looking for facts and you think they're not there and you run into them, and I'm talking about documented, scientific, that's data. And when you can build a model that proves out eyewitness accounts, that's called science. Wake up, people. This is it. It's coming. Whether you like it or not, you can put your head in the sand, but it's not going to do you any good, because the majority of your body's sticking out. It's going to be exposed to the meteor shower coming up. And we have to be prepared for this. And if they go to my YouTube channel, just type in Planet 7X, the numeral 7X, they'll see all of the videos that I give, all of the models and the demonstrations and text and everything. Underneath the videos is a link to a Dropbox to where they can download the free PDF book of all of these documented events. I don't try to rewrite the Bible, I just point you to what paragraphs the text is in, and I show you the science. You got to go back and read the stories to see how real it really is. This is probably the third or fourth most talked about item in the Bible, and very few people know about it.
Well, doesn't that just kind of figure somehow?
Yep.
To me, that makes perfect sense. When Scripture begins to correlate directly with what we call science, I would say people need to pay attention to it more than ever before, and you've already indicated to us. Wake up, people. Here it comes. Yep. Thank you for your work and for sharing it with us.
Sure. You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. Anytime.
Exercise caution in your daily affairs. Eyes up, always. make ready for what's to come. See you soon.
Like it.